high art and skill of the motion picture costume designer, whose sole function is to provide appropriate dress for motion picture stars and featured players.
All of it is a reconstruction. It is a reconstruction in my head as I lay flat on my single bed, rehearsing what I should and shouldn't have said.
What do you think pulls us into a story? What would you say is the main ingredient? Plot, conflict, protagonist or villain? All these things served up properly elicit emotion. Good afternoon, Cape Town. My name is Ane Crabtree. I am an artist and a costume designer. I see myself as something of an emotion decoder for the audience. Design Indaba has invited me to talk to you about this today, and I'm so happy to be here. What I do is act as a kind of connector or conduit of emotion. Emotion in words, in pace, in visuals across the screen. A writer hands me a script, one-dimensional black letters across a white page. From there, what is birthed is the exterior of a character or a three-dimensional armor. I work from the inside out. The costumes I'm designing sometimes have less to do with the external and more to do with the marrow of their bones. When something feels akin to pure emotion, there's harmony in it. It clicks. For me, it usually happens early on. An initial gut feeling or a knowing about a character that says, they should look like this. They should have a sharpness or languid line. And once that happens, it becomes a kind of visual chiropractic adjustment that makes the costume work. When the writer, the director, the actor, and the costume designer are calibrated, the story seeps into us and creates waves of emotion. In scientific circles, I'm what's known as an oddball. I'm known to have a few quirks. When I first got to Hollywood, this did not go over very well. Hollywood is very much about trends and fitting in. The way I dress, the way I work, my sensibilities, even my ethnicity didn't make for quick and easy acceptance in that town. When I moved to Hollywood from New York City, I was broke, in debt, and barely holding on to a single-room apartment and to a rent-a-wreck car that all my Los Angeles friends were embarrassed to see me in. In LA, the look of your car is of the utmost importance. In those days, jeans, a jean jacket, a cap, and construction boots were my uniform of choice. It fit my tomboy attitude. I was a kind of Brando, Bob Dylan sort of designer. You know, the kind that mumbles their words and sings off key. I balked at the idea of wearing the high heels and the tight designer clothing that most of Hollywood was wearing. That kind of resistance had to be part of the reason why I couldn't find work. At that time, I was assisting a friend on a commercial, and I was very happy to have that job. One day, I'm working, and I get a call from my agent. "You won't believe this. Michael Mann wants to see you for a new show." "Well, I can't do it," I said. "I'm assisting my friend." The sound of crickets. "Do you know who Michael Mann is?" More crickets. I did not know who Michael Mann was. This had to be a mistake. In Hollywood, I was a nobody. This would probably lead nowhere, and I couldn't afford to skip out on a job. I had too many bills to pay. At that point, my agent threatened me. I was to get my ass in gear and be at Michael Mann's office the next morning. So now I'm filled with an emotion called fear. But I look at his address, and something occurs to me. My assisting job, Michael Mann's office, and the rent-a-wreck car place all formed a perfect geographical address. The symbology of that triangle gave me a sense of hope. Coincidence? Maybe. But it was just the sign I needed. I had 30 minutes for a lunch break. I decided to pose as a messenger delivering flowers and thank you notes to Michael Mann and a woman named Bernie, who is now a producer of Game of Thrones. I wanted to stand out in a sea of people vying for that same job. I entered the office sweating. I tucked my ponytail in the back of my jean jacket. I just didn't want to be me, delivering flowers one day early. I wanted to be someone who had hired someone, a messenger service to deliver them. The young assistant asked me to sign in. I think I wrote David. She gestured that Bernie's office was right next to her. Oh God, I thought, the big-time producer for the big-time director is going to see me in there one day early. "No, that's okay," I said, lowering my hat over my eyes, and I ran out of there as fast as I could. I'm up all night putting together a presentation, and the next thing you know, I'm in Bernie's office, in the same work uniform, trying to make my way through the script. Bernie had patient, kind eyes. But I'm reading her mind, and she's saying, "Loser, that girl was in here yesterday in that same fucking outfit." She nods to a stack of portfolios just off her desk. Glossy and rich, fat and full of promise. On top of those were my two tiny ones. The feeling of size matters is looming in the silence, and I'm hating myself for always considering large books to be pretentious. She nods. "You see those? You're in luck. Michael has no time and only wanted to see yours because they're small. He needs to see you on set tonight." I arrive on set, and I'm ushered over to Michael Mann, who is surveying the set with steely superhero vision. I stand next to him for an hour, not saying a word. I thought this was some new way, some kind of method form of interviewing. Eventually, he asked me to look through the frame, which were just his hands. He asked me what I thought of the Los Angeles streets and what I thought of inner city crime. I said, "Well, I grew up in the projects." He looked me over, and he said, "You start tomorrow morning." Something about retaining me in the face of knowing nothing else told me that the right person would recognize something that mirrors themselves. My mother's Okinawan, and my father is all kinds of European. I grew up in the southern state of Kentucky, a little town called Henderson. There, I learned a sense of place. And by that, I meant that my mother, my brother, and I were aliens. We didn't belong due to the color of our skin and the shape of our eyes. We couldn't be trusted by the white and black families who lived in the projects with us. There is something about perceived dividing lines that gives people a false sense of self and safety. I kept quiet under those circumstances. When I did speak, I stuttered. I studied why people were content inside of their tropes. In the end, they didn't seem too happy there. As children, we naturally want to cross lines and to color outside of them. At some point, we get separated from ourselves, and we begin to do what society tells us, to stay within the lines and stay within our station. Early on, I decided to retain the child inside. I can't tell you or emphasize enough the impact that had on my creative career. Nature. Nature is the first place and the last place, and the in-between place for me to find inspiration. It connects me to the child inside, and it connects me to emotion. What happens in the natural world is more beautiful, surreal, and divine than anything I can dream up. I think unconsciously, I realized this pretty early on. The beauty and poetry of rural Kentucky may be at the very core of what I do. I've used the texture of an old barn, the wings of a moth, sunlight illuminating a washcloth, the Zen image of snow on rock to inform the costumes. And when looking for a specific color to be born, I look to nature. I look to her to tell me the answer. How does sunlight or the sun setting change that color? How does dirt blowing over a cloth over time affect its color and its shape? As it turns out, all those moments as a child in Kentucky, when I was just stuck or bored, I was, in fact, taking permanent visual notes, taking pictures with my eyes. My job is part costume designer, world builder, and magician. On projects where a new world is created, like Westworld or The Handmaid's Tale, an actor generally heads straight to the costume studio to get ready for the job. The actor enters, they experience another world that embraces, nurtures, and elevates the character. Through a wall of very specific images of the world, soundscapes, music, lighting, and sometimes even scent, I give these actors an immersive experience to get ready for the set. In the case of Gilead, the dystopian world of The Handmaid's Tale, I was taking them to a very cold place that heightened their senses. I invite the actor to step into the costume and into that world. At rep, the actors and even the directors tell me that I helped them form a virtual house to inform their character. This is the greatest compliment. It's not enough for me just to have a costume fit. That's my dog. An example of an actor experiencing full immersion is Madeline Brewer, who plays Janine on The Handmaid's Tale. To prepare her for the colonies, I gave her a kind of spider web-like sweater vest and told her it was Charlotte's web. Charlotte was her baby from season 1 that was taken from her. For season 2, I gave her this kind of visual security blanket that literally wrapped around her. It gave her the why of that scene. I tried to give each actor a little secret, something tactile, to keep them rooted and connected to their costume. The anger and rage I experienced growing up took me to a place of creation, sometimes without me seeing where it was leading me. Nature and anger, big themes that never left, enlightening and feeding my work today. As a costume designer, you are hired as a collaborator, an interpreter. Doing this kind of work, often, I find myself wanting more, wanting to stretch visually. I want to be inspired beyond the costumes. I realize that I have a different approach to the work. My influences and inspirations have more to do with other things, like the dark stuff, the stuff that feeds dystopic inspiration, finding its way into the Handmaid's Tale, a fictitious place, but one that was modeled after a world that I knew well. Through unusual paths and unconventional approaches to costume design, the not knowing of what is normal, this has led me to creating in a way that has become my signature. How does one express their true self without someone just expecting a costume designer? How do you introduce the individual into the collaboration? When you do this, people will love it or hate it, embrace it or maybe reject it. After 29 years, my reputation is such that people have come to expect my individual voice, the evolution of self, starting with who you are. What's brewing in your own soul can transcend the limitation of your own uniform. I had to distinguish who I am, as I didn't want to extinguish the self by trying to be someone else. The point is, don't let others put you into little boxes unless it's the ones you create yourself.